Welcome to the Employer Branding Show, interviews with employer branding and recruitment practitioners to help you kickstart your own hiring efforts. Today we are joined by Flo Feichtinger, who is a bit of an enigma. He's employer branding, he's EVPs, he's not employer branding, he's not EVPs. Great to have you on the show today, Flo.
Hey, good to meet you, my friend.
So, for those of us who don't know who you are and what you do, can you define that? Introduce yourself a little bit?
Of course, man. So I'm Flo from Berlin, 36 years old, 2 kids, single parent. I'm in a patchwork with my girlfriend who has 2 kids as well, so I have at least 2 startups at home in bootstrap mode without funding. Today I would say I'm a bit of an advocate or an activist for more transparent and decentralized organizations and company cultures. So I'm really, for me, employer branding is the end result of all we do. But I think that the entire process goes a lot deeper. And if you like, I can go a little bit back on my journey and elaborate that.
Yeah. I think that would be really, really nice, because I think employer branding is this kind of really nebulous term, and almost everybody I speak to about this has come at it from a different angle, a different kind of journey. So it'd be really interesting to hear how you've got here. And I know your story is quite unique.
Okay, cool. Let's start. So just fast forward, before I jump into the detail, I was an engineer. Then I somehow ended up in recruitment. Then I went on interim roles, building up teams. So everything, people, culture, talent. And I kind of ended up more and more into the employer branding realms. But I think that it all starts with my journey in school. So I hated school. For me, it was a complete nightmare. And being forced into this forced approach, like someone trying to fit you into a box or something, and not giving you any purpose or direction why you are there and why you're learning all this. So for me, that was always very hard. So I guess now I know that structures are a blessing, but also a curse sometimes. So at least if you don't understand them. So if there's no transparency around it. And my mother, she had to kick me out of bed every morning. And I'm really sorry, Mom. But I'm also somehow proud today that I kept resisting what I felt was destroying me in a way. I think I wished it would have been easier for me in these times, because school was a lot of years. But I think that all the things that we experience as difficult, as challenging, they are also the things that shape us, that build up our resilience, our skills. And I think at a certain time you just need to identify what are these skills that we develop through trauma or through challenging times, and accept them as a gift, So basically disconnect them from the experience. And for me, when I connect this to work life, it's like, imagine we would be forced to work for a company and we couldn't do anything about it. We couldn't even choose which company. And what do you think they would care about making our experience pleasant? I guess no, And I think that always reminds me how privileged we are as adults, that we don't live in a kind of suppressed system that exists a lot in our world, and they exist in the lives of our children, depending on which school they're going to. So that was always a big driver for me to never be in that situation again, that I'm forced into something that I don't understand and that I don't feel comfortable with.
Well, that's quite a new concept, because if you think about maybe only 100 years ago, you'd go to school and you'd then go and work at the local factory or the local mine or whoever the local employer was, and that was it. There was no social mobility. Education wasn't designed to let you do whatever you wanted with your career. It was an industrial revolution concept to teach people how to go and do the basic manual labor job that their local town needed.
Yeah, it was basically invented by military. It was kind of get everyone on the same standard, like for bureaucracy, so that everybody could do the same things. I mean, it makes total sense. It made total sense, but it doesn't anymore for a long time already. Huh? So, yeah, and I mean, naturally, I dropped out of school very early, with 17, but with 14 I already started my side gigs. So I started building websites. When we were still using Dreamweaver and Front Page and all that old school stuff that some people might still know, And we were listening to music on Winamp, of course. So these are all the old terms. But I basically dropped out of school with 17. At the same time, I also left home, moved into a flat share, and there was a designer. And we became friends, so we were just 3 people in the flat. So he was a designer. He did that training called media designer. It's kind of a training in Germany where you work at a company, like an agency, and you still go to school. And so we became friends. And since I already had some projects, I hooked him up for these projects, and we kind of started naively our own. We went to the government and registered a company. I was already 18 by then. And then at the same time, I started this training as well, kind of motivated by him, at an agency that was building websites and stuff and interactive stuff with Flash and all these old things from the old days. And we were really working like 14, 16-hour days, I was going to that job for 8 hours, get some food, and then do another 4, 6, sometimes 8 hours. And this was this pure motivation, I was so happy that I had the steering wheel, my own steering wheel in my hands, and I could decide where I go. So I was so full of energy, and I took that kind of to get on my path. So it was really extreme how much we worked, but we still were going to parties and do stuff, and so we were just alive, and we had a lot of energy. And then the company evolved, so I did a lot of consulting as a UX designer for Vodafone. We built games for Ubisoft, worked a lot for advertising agencies. And then my last long gig was in London, actually, on your island. And I was working as a full-stack engineer, and a lot of big projects, big political, a lot of bullshit. But a very nice founding team. They really took a lot of care of me, so I stayed there for 5 years. But it kind of killed my passion in the end. So I was working on these projects that, they were just not, I was just so tired of it. So I took a sabbatical, and by that time, meetup.com was like booming, everybody was doing meetups, and I started a craft beer meetup and many other meetups. So every problem I had, I would start a meetup group. So this was my thing. So I was doing a lot of community building, and somehow during that sabbatical, I ended up building a team for a founder. And by that time, I was really like this with my job. I was like, maybe that's the natural way of kind of getting out of your comfort zone. You start hating it and demonizing it. And but when I built this team, it was like 3 weeks. So basically, I was in a process with them, and in the end, when they offered me, I realized I don't want to do this anymore. They started crying how hard it is to find people, and I was like, that can't be possible. I know so many cool people. You're cool, so where's the problem? So that's when I proposed to do the search, and 3 weeks later, we had a small team of 3 people, and I felt so liberated, like when I was sitting there with my friend in the flat share working. I felt this energy again, because I thought I have to make a cut in my life, do something completely new, start over, but I felt I could take basically everything I've learned into this new experience. And that's when I got into recruitment. Stage 2, basically. And so I basically kept on doing my meetups. I became a bit like an agent for freelancers, so they would give me a cut, I would get them projects. I would just network every day from morning to evening and try to help people with their CVs, connecting co-founders. And I saw more and more that there were a lot of people actually finding jobs through my meetups. And also because the word got around in Berlin. Berlin is a village, so there is a developer doing recruitment, and quickly through my networking, a lot of startups asked me if I can work with them, and I was extremely overwhelmed. And I wasn't a sourcer, I wasn't a strategic recruiting person. So for me, it was this organic bumping into people, and very quickly this wasn't working anymore. So I started a company with a friend, basically a recruitment agency that was community driven. So we would just do community work, and by understanding as an engineer what was so sick in this industry of recruitment, basically our USP was that we try to give real insights about the startups, teams, tech stack, everything basically that you want to know as an engineer, but really the realities of this organization, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we were basically creating these micro handbooks of every startup we were working with, and we were giving that exclusively to the community. Plus, we would bypass them from HR and connect them right to the teams. So we were kind of the matchmakers. And yeah, we had this amazing community that was growing. And I mean, our ritual was every month we invited everyone to a bar, and they just got pissed on us, and we paid the bill. And that was doing a lot of our community work, that was doing our business development, because the founders would come there. There was never like serious business talk. It was just everyone on eye level having a good time, no incentives, and that was kind of our culture, you know. Not to get drunk every month, but just to have a good time together. And that ended up in like a bit more than 80 hires in 3 years, and we did a lot of relocation, and my home became like a hostel. People were living here for weeks, for months, and we would fly in people on our cost and show them the city for a week and try to make them go home with an offer. So we always tried not to do recruitment. And I think this is also the bridge now to employer branding. I always try not to do employer branding because I think I simply wouldn't enjoy it. I wouldn't enjoy doing a marketing job. So this has been a monologue already for a long time. You want to say anything?
You're in flow. You're in flow. That's what I would say with that. But it's such a unique journey, I think, that you're talking about there. From anti-education, teaching yourself how to develop, encountering another problem, recognizing what you don't want to do, then becoming a recruiter because you enjoy the networking aspect of things, meeting people and introducing people, which is something that you seem very naturally adept at. But then you've always been it sounds like you've been quite contrarian all the way through that. It's like you've looked at a problem and said, what's everyone else doing? Let's do the opposite of that. And it seems to work. And I think it's a really a fascinating insight into how to be successful rather than listening to what everyone else is doing in the recruitment and the kind of employer branding space.
Yeah, I think that connects to what I mentioned about this traumatic experience we have in life, that somehow we act like that, but it can also become like a blessing to ourselves to become a signal in the noise. Huh? So so today I don't regret anymore the past, because it all leads us where we are now, right?
Yeah. So why don't you think more companies use this kind of community first approach to finding talent and building their business?
Because I think it's a long shot, huh? And usually when, for example, when I went interim, like building up teams from zero, I mean, there's no time, there's no luxury to hey, let's do 5 meetups and let's see if we will make a hire. So you need to come with methods that are maybe not the most sustainable ones, but they are sustainable because you somehow know, even if the results are low, you get results. By putting X in, you get Y out, and I think it's also, I mean, it's a VC game, right? You go from round to round, there's a lot of pressure, so I think it takes a lot of guts to go the long way, go the sustainable way of how you build your talent network. And I think it wouldn't be wise to just put all your bet on one horse, right? So you still need to do the traditional way to create results, but you should invest into the long-term game. Even, get out of this, it's just the next funding round. Even get out if it's just this venture, because it's all on you. I mean, you will create another venture eventually and another one. So building networks and communities and being active there, this is what every person should do at least 30% of their time. And I guess recruiters should do it like 80% of their time. So...
that kind of, I suppose it's called personal branding nowadays, where you're trying to build out your own brand because you never know when you need it. Like, in 10 years' time, I might start a company and I might need to hire 10 people. I should start, the best time to build the brand is now, before I need it, before I need the network. You build it and you make connections and you turn up to that, which amazes me, because I see, and this is just a personal bugbear at the moment, is I look at LinkedIn and how few people use LinkedIn effectively to build connections and share ideas. I think it's still got so much great potential, but people are, for whatever reason, scared about getting involved in having these kind of conversations in public, and it's a great shame, but there's some still great opportunities, I think, for people.
You can include me into that. I was blocking myself for many years from becoming active on LinkedIn. I think that one reason people don't know how it works, so it's hard to kind of understand, and we are all overwhelmed, especially in recruitment, and the whole talent category. People are always understaffed. People work under wrong KPIs, so it's especially in agencies. But agencies, I don't see that much agencies anymore. It's I always try to avoid working with them, but somehow they're not in my view anymore. But it's a lot about the internal recruiters, how they need to learn this.
I think that networking piece, I think, is a huge thing. That's something for us to talk about another time, I think.
Yes.
So one of the things that we're trying to do on the Employer Branding Show is share some practical, applicable tactics and strategies for particularly in-house recruiters when they've been tasked with employer branding. And I know you're anti-employer branding, but if you were to be given the role of approaching employer branding at a company that hasn't got anything, how would you go from kind of a 0 to a 1 with that business using your approach, your unique approach?
I can start with an example. So with a real world example.
Fantastic.
So basically, after I got tired of doing Dev Buddies, the community-driven recruiting agency, because when our job ended, it actually got interesting for me. So I really wanted to be in that company, in that culture, and make impact there, and not just by giving them people. So I basically left the company, gave it to my co-founder, and I went for the first time interim. And there was a crypto company. It was very early stage. I guess it was maybe 10 people at that time. And I got in there, and basically there was nothing. Actually, people were leaving. There were problems in the team, and it wasn't a good energy. People felt really tired, and it was really hard for me. My first gig, and I come into this gray zone, and but I started talking to everyone, talking to the CTO, doing kind of my hiring manager interview to kind of get the insights I needed, because there was really nothing to kind of start sourcing. And I created this very long FAQ and filled it up throughout the days. And when I had all my insights, I was like, okay, what's next? So I need my tools. So I need to, create a career page or a pitch or whatever. Then I was like, oh no, this takes too much time. I need to start hiring. And then I while trying to create a pitch, I went through my doc, and I was like, that's actually a cool doc, and it kind of reminded me what we were doing in Dev Buddies with these micro handbooks. So I went to the CTO and CEO and said, look, let's just use this FAQ, let's just publish it. And they said, okay, that sounds like a cool idea, let's do it. So I was not publishing it on a website, but sending it out to engineers while approaching them. And the CTO, he didn't realize that there were questions inside like, what is toxic right now? Why are people leaving? All the hard questions. And I just published this. Just sent this out to people. And the reactions, they were so crazy. There was so much inside about values, about personal development, about salary, all this information, tech stack, blah, blah, blah. But everyone got back to me, like everyone who really read it, like, oh my God, you're sharing all these insights. You must be so transparent. This is so refreshing. Let's talk, So by basically sharing all the good, the bad, and the ugly with them, but also the response from the CTO, what he's going to do about it now. So his plans. People were really getting this trust, And that's when I really started realizing it's all about open source. You need to tell the entire story. Otherwise, people will never believe you. And I think that's something what I can give to companies. If you feel there is nothing, that means you're trying to invent something. You're trying to come up with something. It's not about coming up with something, it's about surfacing. And if there would be nothing, there would be no companies. So there is something. There is good, bad, and ugly. And try to get it out there, I think that's also how I approach it with companies. So I always tell them, forget about employer branding for now. We can look at this in a few weeks. But now we need to get all the gold nuggets out. Or you need to understand your own organization, and you need to enable people to understand the organization. So basically, what it's like there, or what does it take to thrive there? And I think most importantly, in the end, the benefits that you're offering are the worth this sacrifice. So I think these are like the main pillars, like purpose, impact, and belonging. This first, the organization needs to understand it themselves and not make it up for a future employee.
So just to try and reword that, so essentially for a business that needs to kickstart an employer brand, they need to recognize that they already have an employer brand. It just needs to be captured and then shared. So whatever it is, like as you say, good, bad, ugly, try and capture that and then share that in a way that demonstrates what it's like to work at the business.
Exactly. And I think that's in the majority of organizations, even the people who work there for a long time, they don't even understand it. Why people have problems with retention? Because people don't know what it takes to thrive. So I guess that's what I mean. It's not about employer branding. It's really about building an organization that is healthy and that works, that is transparent.
So how would you go about capturing those nuggets?
In the beginning, I was doing it a lot because I was always still wearing the talent hat. So I would do it like an underdog, I would just, do interviews, talk to people, just find my way. I was building these handbooks in future interim roles. So you can also see them in my LinkedIn profile. A couple of them are linked there. So I really tried the organization to create their own playbook, and by creating that playbook about everything, how the organization works, they basically had to deal with every aspect of the organization. So you want to describe how remote first works, then you figure it out. Companies realize, shit, we call ourselves remote first, but we have never thought about rituals, about budgets. Same goes for salary brackets. So every artifact of an organization, they had to work through it by creating a company handbook. And that for me was always amazing, because I always try to tell people that everything you do when you think of employer branding, first, not to think about it, and second, everything you do has to make 100% value, bring 100% value to yourself, to your organization. Only then there's a chance it will resonate with someone. So by basically creating the handbook, many companies improve their organizational designs or operational excellence and the life of people. At the same time, by publishing this handbook, to the wide open, they created a very noise-making employer branding piece. So that's always my approach. Start with loving yourself, and then you can love others. It's
as a good meta skill or way of looking at the world. And so shine a light on what's currently in existence, capture that, and it's going to improve just by asking the questions, isn't it? It's going to make people think about things. Oh, no one's ever thought about that or asked us a question about that before. Let's try and figure it out. And then by sharing the fact that you're trying to figure it out, it's great transparency rather than just saying, yeah, everything's great. Like, if you would put out a social media post saying, hey, we've got an exciting and dynamic new role for a head of engineering or something like that, and this is a great company that's on the up and up, no one's going to believe you. And even if they did believe you and then they joined and then they actually saw what it was like from day one, it's completely different. So that kind of transparency, I think, must have won you a lot of friends.
Yeah, I mean, it's like dating, right? I mean, if you sell yourself like 180% in the end, even if you're great, people will be, they will be sad because they find out the truth. Huh?
Yes, don't pretend to be someone who you're not.
yeah, but it's really hard. I mean, and maybe that's now. I shared that this is how I was doing it in the past. Now connecting it how I do it nowadays more in a more systematic way. I realized when I was too involved into creating these handbooks, of course there was again distortion and orchestration. So throughout these projects I realized that from day one everyone needs to be involved. So otherwise someone else will still sit there and describe how the culture is on a culture page, and we have the same problem again, even if it's maybe less, but it's still. So my goal was really to make it extremely raw. And in one organization, what we did, they were basically closing Series A funding, and they kind of felt they need to take a halt and get ready for the next round, basically until Series B. And naturally, what companies do, they do a survey, right? But surveys, in my opinion, they give you data, but they give you the what, but not the why. And I think that's why a lot of these surveys fail or the action on it. And I think that the problem is that it's always leadership or people ops or operation in general who are left with it, and with this very limited data of what and not why. And so what we did is we decided to do an entire year retrospective with the entire company. So we got everyone into a virtual island in Gather. It's like a tool where you can like a 2D world. And we did an entire retro with everyone. And in the end, we had basically every team had to bring their focus areas, and we merged them into company focus areas. And then in the end, we introduced like something like a guild system into the company for 3 months, that everyone could basically join these guilds based on these 3 focus areas. It was like culture, process, and collaboration. And then everyone in the company was allowed to a certain time budget to work on those initiatives. And that was crazy. I mean, I felt it's going to work, but I never thought it's going to work that well, because so many people got active in the organization to really shape it together, And it's also interesting, in a survey, you just throw it, and because you don't care, because you don't have to fix it, you don't own it. But really, by giving people this ownership, it completely changed the game, how people would see the organization and how they would prioritize things. And I think before talking about what we can learn from open source principles about transparency and understanding your own value and then giving that value to others to have this resonating factor, if you look at blockchain or Web3, it's all about decentralization. I mean, we see how thick centralization can be if you look at the European Union, for example, or other aspects, or the financial sector, or whatever. So I think like bringing this decentralized thinking, how blockchain works, for example, into organizational structures, it really at least helped me to really increase employee engagement. So
I'm hearing
everyone
that from
part of it.
I'm hearing that from a few people.
You can get this engagement that people will, that they will also invest into whatever it is, which will eventually turn into an employer branding piece.
And I think getting people involved is so key at a real basic level. And I'm hearing this from a few different places where, with my recruiter hat on, so it's the recruiter's problem to try and find people for the company and hire them. And if we're not finding people, what's recruitment doing about it? Is the wrong approach. It's an organization problem. And how do you make everybody an advocate for the work that they need to do to find people to join the company? And then you're talking about what kind of organizational pillars. And again, it used to be HR or the culture lead, and actually they should just be facilitators. It's something that the whole company owns. I really like that as something for people to experiment with and acknowledge that probably it'll have some. It'll be a challenge, but people coming together normally will normally find a solution that works for that particular organization, won't they? Yeah, I think some companies will learn a lot from that, Flo. And I think how would a recruiter make the case for this at a company? Because they're not the head of, they're not the founder.
I think that, again, we go into organizational design. I mean, I think the problem. I mean, HR is no longer called HR. People and culture. It's just growing up, you know. I think the first step is that people realize that we should treat people and culture same as how we develop products. But often, what I saw in organizations is that HR or people ops was like the little sis of the founders, you know. Just execute it, just make sure that we get people, that people stay, that it was never treated as a pillar. And I think it's the root pillar, you know, that enables everything. And I think that's the first approach that you start, if you are not in this kind of position already, get into that position and realize where you are, that you are one of the main pillars. And I think the first hurdle is the hiring manager, right? They're always busy. They never have time for you. And actually, they should be the ones in the driver's seat. And that's probably the biggest pain for recruiters nowadays. But I think here again, you come to them. They are already busy. They don't have any time. Nobody has time for you because they want you to find people because you don't have time. So again, you need to follow the same approach and not ask them for extra time, not ask them to come up with something. You need to build rituals that bring value to them, to their teams, and then find the bridge how this can be turned into something that is good for employer branding. So there's one article also in my LinkedIn where I write about how you can turn every employee into a talent influencer. And I think you need to build these rituals where you can capture these stories. For example, very easy, if you would start a new position, the hiring manager could, during the kickoff of the position, everyone in the team needs to understand, right? They need to get conscious about the position. They will be part of the interview panels probably. They need to be part of designing the job description. And so why not have, let's say, a set of 6 or 10 questions that are related to that role, to the field, to the team. And why not ask those questions on a weekly or bi-weekly or 2 times a week or 1 time per week to the entire team and ask the team to answer them publicly on LinkedIn. So first, it increases the awareness in the team about the role, about the challenges of the role. So it will, there will be much better interviewers and much better insight givers. Second, if these questions are made the way that people have to reflect on stuff, you give them me time. You give them time to reflect on their work, on their principles, on their methods. So even if they would never post it, even if they would never use it as an employer branding piece, you would already create a lot of value in the organization. So I think that's always my approach. That, this is one approach. So only ask them to do things or come up with things together with them that creates value for them. and then just take it, build the bridge to the outside. And second, just do it. Don't ask for permission. Just do it. Showcase the impact that you are doing, and then you don't have to come to ask people to help you. People will come to you and ask for your help.
Yeah,
I think that's I think
beg for forgiveness rather than asking permission. It's a tactic I've used before, and I could totally see it working in this scenario. 100%.
Yeah. Just be bold. Talk to a few engineers. Ask them some questions. But it has to be quick, right? You have to bring quick results. Otherwise, people will stop you. So I think it's a bit of a anarchistic approach, but and also don't think about the end result of employer branding when you do that as a recruiter. Think how can you bring value to that particular person, to that particular team, or for that particular challenge that exists in the organization. So be an org designer. Everyone should be an org designer.
That's a nice segment there, Flo. That's fantastic. Can I ask you some quick fire questions now?
Sure.
Yeah? You ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. What tech stack do you use to do your work in recruitment and anti-employer branding and organizational design?
I guess 19% is Notion. So the last 2-3 years, I've been I could just live in a browser. So it's a lot of Notion, and I'm using a software as a service called super.so. Shout to the team in Australia. It's basically a static website engine that you can put in front of Notion. I'm sure you will link it there. So you can basically turn Notion into a super website. So it's basically the sugar on top, the nitro. I mean, you can publish a Notion page, right? But with Super, you can apply JavaScript, CSS. You have better SEO. You can have sitemaps, toolbars, everything. So you can really turn Notion into a complete website, which is pretty cool.
That sounds really cool. I use Notion all the time. I've not heard of Super. So I definitely share the link with me, and I can share it in the show notes for everyone to get into. And you never know, there might be some employer branding show websites being thrown up using Super in the future. That sounds cool.
Yeah, hit me up. Other things, I think a lot of Miro and Mural for workshops. I'm a real big fan of unconferences, but I think that's for another time. And of course, LinkedIn. And I think since just 2-3 weeks since we met, I got crazy on LinkedIn for the first time in my life. So I'm really trying to push it there. And it's there's a lot of learning. So
as I said,
right, main tools.
As I said right at the beginning, like LinkedIn, I think is still untapped by people. One tool that you mentioned earlier was Meetup. Is that something that you'd still advocate for?
No, I think since the pandemic, I haven't been really to a meetup.
Yeah.
And even the remote ones or the remote conferences, I find them really hard to focus because passive formats are in itself really hard. I find on conferences, I always remember the bar and the chats, the coffee cooler chat, the water cooler chats, and the workshops. And doing that remotely, for me, even became harder to listen to hours of monologue. So I think for me, unconferences, it's a more open format. We can also share a link down there so people can understand what it is. It's an anti-conference format.
Yeah. And what was the program that you mentioned where people met virtually?
It was Gather. It's gather.town. It's amazing. Another cool tool is wonder.me. I was also working with them, so it's a cool tool. And I think about facilitation, I mean, I would also call it part of the tech stack. For me, liberating structures, this is the most amazing thing for me that I discovered for facilitation, workshopping, and everything. So we can also share a link about that. It's some amazing methods how you can facilitate groups from 8 to 1,000 people to get a structured output. It's really powerful. So I think that's the new game. Everyone should learn to become a facilitator. Everybody should grow that skill.
Yeah, I think it's a quite a unique skill set, isn't it? And like it used to just be good enough to bring people together, but now actually making it so that it's a more engaging experience. I share with you that feeling that a lot of remote conferences or gatherings leave me cold. I can't engage with them. They're so soporific. So it's using some of the ideas that you've mentioned there and some of the technologies there to just make it a little bit more engaging. Sounds like a great idea. And imagine imagine the events companies could put on to build up their community using these technologies. I think we're scratching the surface about what companies could do. Now we'll have to get you back to talk about that specific thing about building communities in public a bit more.
Yeah,
Thanks for that.
It's itching me, but I will keep my mouth shut on this one.
Okay, next question. What's your most recommended book for a new recruiter or a new person interested in employer branding?
Actually, I have two now. Just one other one popped up in my mind. So the first one, I just bought it recently. It's called Give and Get Employer Branding. Repel the many and compel the few with impact, purpose, and belonging. It's by Brian Adams and Charlotte Marshall from PH Creative. And when I was reading this, it was like, wow, yes, the one. Here we go. So for me, it was like, oh my God, someone built a system around the mindset I somehow developed. But I mean, they are really, it's like a Bible, but a practical one. I mean, it's really like, you learn how to pray, and how to evangelize, but they really built a very solid framework how to get what I'm doing on a, still very amateurish, style, So they've been doing this for, I don't know, maybe more than a decade, working with biggest organizations in the world, huh? It's very eye-opening.
It is. I think there is an element that it is pitched to slightly larger organizations still, and a very brand-heavy focus. I think there's some more practical things that smaller organizations could do, but I think it's a very useful book to kind of for people to read and go through, to understand a lot of the concepts in the employer branding space, definitely.
Yeah, and what is employer branding, what is employer branding not, and what, I mean, understanding the whole EVP, employer value proposition piece. And it was just so refreshing. And they describe it so simply, so you can read the first 10 pages and you get it, you get the essence of it. Huh?
Yeah. That's a real advantage of it, definitely. What was the other book that you mentioned?
Culture Your Culture is also great. So it basically, it's a bit like the HR Professional book, which is another one, but the statement here is that you can't change culture by changing culture. So you can only change culture by changing structure, which causes behavioral change, which causes cultural change. So, and there is also a lot of practical. So it's really a handbook. It's a playbook. I haven't been reading a lot in there. Right, I'm never read books end to end, but it has a lot of practical things. Like, so if you're looking for frameworks for a way to kickstart this kind of approaches, I think these two books are really good.
Yeah, that'd be good reading for anybody that's just starting a career in those areas or looking to move into more employer branding spaces. There's some great recommendations there. We'll link those up, not a problem. Final question for you, Flo. Who's an up-and-comer in recruitment or employer branding that you think we should all be keeping an eye on?
I mean, now we can spoil it. You gave me that question before because you knew it would be hard to come up with something there. And and it was pretty hard. Also, I think because sometimes I feel like an alien in this still. And I feel like it's hard to find people who I don't know, think in the same way. So and also I've never been really active in the employer branding community. Just really a few weeks, I really jumped into the water to meet
Yeah.
all kind of people there. But I came up with a person who I know for around 1.5 years. Her name is Susanna Velika, and I've been a bit like a mentor to her in the last months. And she basically has a background in NGOs. She has been a recruiter for NGOs and being an NGO person in general for more than a decade. She basically recruited entire refugee camps. So super interesting, very community-driven person. So everything she does, she thinks in terms of community. And I basically helped her to get into the startup world. And she's super fresh in this. She's so smart, and I love the way she thinks and the way she approaches everything. And I think it's really finding that balance, what we said about going for the long shot, but also getting the quick wins and results. Yeah. But to me, I have a feeling in 10 years, a lot of people will know her. She gave me so much fun and realization. She works at Deed. Join Deed. It's a social first startup, and they basically they connect NGOs and companies. So it's a marketplace where you as a company basically can give your people's talent, or people can give their talent and their time to NGOs and projects. I think like hundreds of thousands of projects.
Man,
so
that's what a recommendation. What we'll do is we'll put Suzanne's LinkedIn URL in, so people can go and follow and see what she's up to, and maybe we can try and get her on the show in the future as a possible guest. That'd be wonderful. Flo, thank you so much for sharing today your unique insight into anti-employer branding and building talent and how to look at culture. I think there's some really unique learnings from that a lot of people will resonate with. What's the best way for people to follow you online and keep in contact with what you're up to?
LinkedIn. Just connect, and I try to stay active there. Do a post every day, write articles, and
Fantastic. Well, I'll make sure people reach out to you there, and we'll put a link to your LinkedIn on all the show notes. Flo, thanks ever so much for joining us today on the Employer Branding Show. Hey,
and one last thing. Thank you very much. If everyone ever wants to, understand more about liberating structures, everything, I love to spread what I love. So always hook me up. We do a 15 minutes call or something, and share ideas.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Flo.